If you've just opened the Serger ProFinish Serger from the box, it is still threaded with the thread that came from the factory. So we're going to go through threading this machine correctly from the beginning and all my tips and tricks along the way. This is the video that if you need to re-watch, you're going to pick up tips every time you watch it again. So the first thing I'm going to advise is quality thread. There is a difference. This serger is going to work much better if you feed it good thread. So we have put links below this YouTube video where you can find quality thread, and trust me, spend that extra money, this serger will thank you later. So right now there is all the thread is in all the threading paths, and we need to remove it from the serger. You might even find that it still has that little chain that is been run out the last time it was used, but when you pull on it, you notice everything is very tight. Here you can look at all the tensions, and they are all at 3. So if we go and loosen them down to 0 or less than 1, we'll be able to turn those back to the normal settings. Take your scissors and snip all the threads from the top, and you'll find that these threads will, with a little help, pull right out through the serger. Now, I am a fan of pulling threads through the serger and not back up into the serger, pulling them the opposite way. Once you start using it, there is a lot of lint and dust that gathers with sergers as we sew. So we do have all the colors lined up here, and plus this isn't a great quality of thread. I will tell you, you can use it for a little bit, but for any reason you're not getting the results that you're after, you will find that better quality thread will help greatly. Now, if you haven't already, this part here does slide all the way up. Make sure you get it to the highest position. And there is an order we must thread the serger in. You'll notice that the number 1 is the red one, number 2 is the yellow one, and 3 and 4 is the green and blue. And I'm going to explain each of these as we thread the serger, and then once you see them actually stitched out, you'll be like, oh yeah, the yellow one does this, and oh, the blue one does that. So I hope the first time you thread your serger, you will do the same. So let's do that in that particular order. We're going to start with the red one, or I'm going to use pink today. And this particular one we start with is called the upper looper. So take your thread, put it on the thread stand, and then bring the thread over the top of the tree. So you'll notice it will come directly above the spool. Next, we're finding that if you kind of peek behind the serger, there is a way for this thread to hook underneath and then come down the groove. Now, these are the tensions. So here's what I want you to do is once you bring your thread down in here, I want you to give it a little floss back and forth. That makes sure that it gets deep into those areas. And also my presser foot is up, so that will make things a little easier too. So later we will turn these tensions all back to 3, but we'll just leave them at that reduced number so the thread easily gets into everything. Next, your tweezers are going to be your best friend, and we're going to follow the guides, all the red guides for this particular upper looper. And I'm going to have you join me as we peek where this thread needs to go. So the first guide we want to make sure it goes behind is the one right under this housing. So just take your tweezers and slip it behind that little guide. Next, you'll find that this red guide has a little red dot at the top of it. And you're also noticing that all these guides are open. So as I lift the thread into the next one, and the one over here, that if you forget one or one comes out for any reason, you don't have to rethread the serger. You can easily just hook it back underneath. Except for the very last one. This is the upper looper. There is a hole at the end of this little finger. And if this is dark where you are sitting, remember a flashlight or the flashlight on your cell phone might be handy to keep close by so you can shine a brighter light into this area. So watch how I'll be using my tweezers. As I pick up the end of the thread, if I come really close to the end and then also match the angle of my tweezers with the end of the thread. It makes it really easy to push it through. Now this is a very large eye right here, but as I bring it, you can bring it out the back, you can bring it over the foot, which is what I'm doing. Just make sure it doesn't get caught on anything else along the way. So that is an easy threaded area. The upper looper is the one that actually will be coming above the foot when we actually see it in use. Next is our yellow thread, and that's our lower looper. Has just a little trick to it. Once we get down to this area, we'll be following this little path that I will explain. Begin with the same way, placing your spool on the back of the machine and coming up to the top. Make sure it hooks underneath and you floss down through that tension disc. Our lower looper is what we are going to follow. We'll start by coming behind the guide, kind of at the bottom of this housing like before. We have 3 guides, actually 4, that we'll be catching here. So I'm going to just kind of help it into that guide, help it up into the next one, and the little path here. And there's one more right here that has the yellow. So just we're lifting it into that guide. If you need to, take your hand and help hold it up while you lift it into position. So next, the lower looper is you might say the most difficult one to thread. You will see that we will eventually go through this eye, and it's called the lower looper because it is the one working underneath the throat plate, underneath the foot and everything. But there's a place at the way back of his elbow, if I may, that needs to be threaded. So this little picture is guiding us to just set it behind that looper point. And then we're going to let it kind of disappear. And as you let it kind of push all the way back, it should fall into the guide, which I can feel it has, because when I bring the thread out, it's going to lay in this little groove here. That's my way of telling if I've actually caught it back there, because now when I pull and I get ready to thread the tip through the lower looper, there's my thread and my tweezers, that I can go ahead and push it through. Now I'm hitting kind of that upper looper, so I'm going to just twist the hand wheel just a little bit. They're almost like crossed swords right now, and so as I thread it, it will go up and over the upper looper. Again, I'm going to just make sure my thread doesn't get caught on anything. But here is what I wanted to show you. This is the way I can tell if my students have done this correctly, because I can see that this thread is right in that lined up area of the lower looper. Now, if that didn't look too hard and you do it successfully the first time, that is the hardest part of the serger. So congratulations, it's all downhill from here. So congratulations, it's all downhill from here. We have 2 needles to thread and we'll be ready to serge. I am going to pass this thread up and over the presser foot so it joins the pink thread from the upper looper from before. Since you're getting used to this top part, I'm going to bring over our right needle thread, which is our green thread, and our blue one, which is our left needle thread, simultaneously, because they're going to follow about the same path. They'll just be going in 2 different needles. So here's our left needle. There's times where we use just the right needle, sometimes we use just the left needle, but we're setting up for a 4-thread overlock, and we'll be using both needles at this time. Starting with the right needle, we'll come underneath this guide, underneath the next one. This is my green one, so I'm going to go over the top. The blue one will come in the lower part here, kind of in those little mouths, and then it's just going to twist around the very top guide above the needles, and then I'm going to go ahead and thread the needle from front to back. Now if you have trouble threading needles, I would recommend getting a handheld needle threader from a local sewing machine store. They will make a huge difference, trust me, and they are easy. But using tweezers for the meantime usually is what makes this work for me. So next we are sharing this guide with the blue one. In the inside here, give it a little twirl at the top of the needle and thread the needles. Now, right now we have 4 individual threads that have not been connected into that famous chain just yet. So I'm going to show you my suggestion, ways that you can make sure that all the threads get going in the right order as you take your very first stitch. Now, don't forget, we did lower those tensions down. 3 is about that normal setting, so we'll start at that point. We're going to close up that front door. That should just click nice and smooth and flush all together here. Take a piece of fabric and fold it in half. So here's something you'll see me do all the time. You're going to see me sewing on a piece of fabric, fold it in half, and I'm going to be sewing off the fold. As I serge off the fold, that allows me to open it up and peek on the inside while I'm evaluating if the seam is all correct. I can also peek inside. If you sew on this side without the fold, now you can't really open it. You have to kind of cut it open. So that's my quick, easy setup here. Next, I still have the presser foot up, so why not just take your fabric and bring it underneath the presser foot like you're almost doing a sewing machine stitch. Now, you don't have to do this, but this is one way to kind of guarantee that when you set this presser foot down, and don't forget to do that, otherwise things don't work either, is hand turn the first couple stitches, and because your needles go into fabric first, they kind of get right into position for that perfect overlock. You can even take a first couple stitches by hand, even see if things are looking together, because once we start to sew, all 4 of these individual threads will be all linked together. You could even trim these off once you kind of get started, but we're going to just stitch right off the edge. And if everything is threaded correctly while you're after this, you'll find you will have a nice even 4-thread overlock. When you're ready to go off the edge of the fabric, you'll have that nice chain. I like to bring out about 3-4 inches worth of the chain and bring it underneath my presser foot. And when I step on the foot control, it brings the thread underneath the foot and I can cut it off. So now I have my beginning part. Let's do a fresh seam from the top. I'm going to start in a little bit so it cuts it off, and I'm going to cut off this whole part, and you'll see me from top to bottom how I use a serger. So you can set the fabric right up to the foot, let it pull it right on in, cut off everything that you want, keep serging, and in one motion go ahead and get it cut. So you don't have to lift and lower the presser foot, which is wonderful. So now we have a perfect 4-thread overlock that is holding my fabrics together. It has cut a nice clean edge, and we see each of the loopers. The first one, the pink one, is the one going back and forth here. The yellow one is the one going back and forth here. And my 2 needles, the blue and the green, are actually what you see as sewing like stitches on the front, and that is what's creating the seam. So as we go into our next set of videos for the Singer ProFinish Serger, I'm going to show you all the ins and outs from stitch length to differential feed, how to manipulate this stitch into other stitches like a rolled hem and a flat lock stitch.